Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're located, and a very warm welcome to the webinar, Navigating the Policy Landscape for E-Waste Management in the Humanitarian Context. My name is Diana Röschen, and I will be your moderator for this webinar today. So this webinar is organized jointly by GPA, UNITAR, and the GIZ project Energy Solutions for Displacement Settings. And it is part of an ongoing webinar series on energy in the humanitarian context. In fact, today we have the last webinar of the series and also for this year. So it's great that you are joining us today. We're very happy about this and excited as we have great panelists with us today, and I will introduce them later to you. Yeah, they all been working with e-waste and e-waste regulations on the ground, and we are already excited to be hearing what they will have to tell us. So as usual, for this webinar, we'll be taking your questions. For that, please use the question tab on your screen in order to post your questions. And just in case you cannot see it, there's a little white arrow on an orange ground, and if you click on that, your question panel should expand, and then you can post your questions there. And if you do post your questions, please state to whom of our panelists today the question is addressed, so that we know exactly to whom the question goes to, and we can answer it accordingly. If it goes to all our panelists, of course, you can say it's to all of them. We're looking forward to receiving your questions today. So before we start, let's have a very quick look at today's agenda. Hold on, there we go. Yeah, we will kickstart with my colleague Lukas from GIZ ESDS project. He will open up the topic and give a short introduction just now. After that, we will have Elif Demir from GPA UNITAR, and she will give us a short summary of some key takeaways from the first e-waste webinar, which we had 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I'm sure some or most of our audience today have joined for the first e-waste webinar also. So there will be a quick recap on that one. After that, we will have Monica Wambui from CLASP. She will give a presentation on extended producer responsibility. Very much looking forward to that. And she will be followed by our great expert practitioners that we have with us today for a panel discussion. I will introduce all of them later in a bit more detail. And it will be an insightful and exciting discussion, I'm sure. And after that, we will have around about 15 to 20 minutes left for the question and answer round. So please do post your questions throughout the webinar. Do not hesitate, and we're looking forward to be receiving your questions. Yeah, also please note this webinar is recorded, and you will find the documentation for that in a link that's also posted in the chat. So for the time being, I'm handing over to my colleague Lukas. Lukas, the floor is yours. Please turn on your microphone and camera. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Please nod, Diana, if you hear me. Okay, I assume you hear me. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hear you. Thank you.
Great. Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Lukas, and I'm giving you a quick introduction. I'm working in the GIZ project ESDS, and I will give you a very, very short introduction just on the project, and then I explain you why we're doing this webinar. So yeah, as I said, I'm working in the Energy Solutions for Displacement Settings project, which is the energy component of an overarching project, which is called Support to UNHCR in the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees in the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus. And our project addresses the need to facilitate energy access in displacement settings by developing and implementing energy access through market-based approaches. in close partnership with UNHCR and implementing partners in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. And yeah, more information on the project and resources developed by our project you can find on our Energipedia portal, which you probably already have accessed through registering for this webinar. So yeah, the question is, why are we doing this webinar? So if we talk about energy access always comes with appliances or equipment, such as electrical or electric equipment, or EEE. And this equipment, and in general any type of equipment, breaks at one point of time and reaches the end of life. So therefore, EEE, but again, any type of equipment, needs to be handled or managed in a way that conforms to circular economy approaches. Because EEE, for example, eventually ends up as e-waste at one particular time. So according to the Global E-Waste Monitor in 2019, for example, only around 17% of globally generated e-waste has been officially documented as properly collected or recycled. This number is assumed to be lower in displacement settings because mostly in these settings there is no official or formal waste management system existing. But even though if there's no official system existing, of course, informal e-waste management is practiced. For example, through the repair of cell phones or solar lanterns. And as well, humanitarian and development organizations, but as well others like the private sector, observed as well this e-waste issue in displacement settings and started to work on this topic. So this is the reason why we did or still do these two webinars, because we aim to shed light on the rising issue of e-waste in humanitarian settings and the complexity of e-waste management. And through, for example, our panel discussion today, we would like to share experiences from on the ground. So as Diana already said, today we're going to dive deeper into the policy landscape of e-waste management in humanitarian context by having a presentation on extended producer responsibility as an effective measure that is already found in policy addressing e-waste management in various countries. And we're going to have the panel discussion that I already just mentioned with people from humanitarian and development organizations and the private sector that work on the e-waste problem and who will share their experiences, how policies affect their work. So before we start with the presentation, as Diana as well said, I would like to hand over to Elif. She is the co-organizer of these webinars, and she's giving you a quick summary of the key takeaways of the first webinar a few weeks ago. So thank you very much. It's really nice that all of you are here. I appreciate that, and I wish you a very interesting 1.5 hours.
Thank you so much, Lucas. Can you hear me all right? I'm assuming yes.
Yes.
So, okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to part of our webinar series on e-waste and displacement settings. As mentioned, my name is Elif Güldemir. I'm the coordination and e-waste lead at the GPA coordination unit. And in case you're not familiar with what GPA is, we are a global platform working to achieve SDG 7 in displacement settings so that it is inclusive of displaced communities like refugees, internally displaced people, asylum seekers, and the host communities. And today I'll be sharing some highlights from the first webinar for those of you who weren't able to join or those who would appreciate a little refreshing of the memories. So we kicked off the series with an introduction to the topic of e-waste in displacement settings, and we heard from humanitarian and development organizations like IOM and GIZ, University of Edinburgh about their research with UNHCR, and Gobla as solar off-grid industry representative. This gave us an opportunity to hear perspectives from different stakeholders in the sector and take a more holistic approach to the problem. And the presentations from myself highlighted the lack of formal e-waste management in displacement settings, with most end users hibernating their products due to perceived value and low risk awareness. And of course, there are several factors that cause this situation, such as lack of regulatory framework in host countries, the fact that electronics are easily repairable or recyclable, lack of high quality spare parts and tools for those repair and repurposing activities, and the fact that there are few collection points and take-back schemes to incentivize end users to dispose their products. There is also limited data and awareness on e-waste volumes and practices. And also it takes a long time, high cost and low economies of scale to do e-waste management properly in settings like displacement contexts. And currently we lack a sustainable business model to ensure that humanitarian organizations can effectively run this. So after listing out these challenges, we looked at some of the opportunities or quick wins for managing e-waste in displacement settings. Can we go to the next slide, please, Diana? So this chart tries to address each stage of the product life cycle. So we think about not just the disposal or recycling aspect, but also prevention and lifetime extension aspects of the circularity principles. And when it comes to design, we talked about how humanitarian organizations can encourage manufacturers to design products that are durable, reusable, repairable, and easily recyclable. And they can also make sure that products meet end user needs, so they're in use for longer periods of time instead of being hibernated at home or sold in the market in exchange of something else. In terms of the procurement, here, humanitarian organizations have enormous purchasing power to set higher standards for these products and produce new guidelines for their quality. And they can also encourage manufacturers to offer repair services and extended warranties close to the displacement settings. In terms of repair and reuse, we talked about how we can improve access to spare parts and tools for these activities, and how humanitarian organizations can work with end users on understanding and explaining how to extend product lifetime or how to fully charge the products to extend battery life. In addition, we talked about humanitarian option to provide trainings to technicians to support refugee economies, which has great social, economic, and environmental benefits. And when it comes to the collection, we talked about exploring take-back schemes and incentives for collection of end-of-life products. We also highlighted the importance of connecting with other humanitarian agencies and closer region to exchange knowledge and also achieve economies of scale together. And when it comes to recycling, there is this option to check defective products to see if some of these parts can be repurposed as spare parts for other products. Also, humanitarian organizations can explore options for repurposing batteries through boosting and testing and other new technologies. So across all the stages of a product life cycle, enabling environment plays a huge role in terms of providing an effective policy framework for both humanitarian organizations and companies to operate. And the main message was that e-waste management is a non-competitive area which needs quick action, so we need coordination and collaboration among humanitarian organizations, private sector companies, and also regulatory bodies to achieve successful e-waste management in displacement settings. I believe these points covered the main takeaways from our first webinar. I hope this summary set the scene for the exciting presentation and the panel that we have today for you. Time, and right back to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Lucas and Elif, for the topic introduction and giving us the key takeaways from last webinar. Yeah, before we now move on to Monica, we would like to engage you, our audience, with a quick poll. We have 2 questions for you, and I will launch the first one now. It reads, what is the most common practice towards a product's end of life that you observe at your house? So please select one of the questions, one of the possible answers. And please give us your response now. I can see the answers are coming in. I will give it a few more moments. Please select the answer that you think is the most common practice. Okay, I'll close the poll now and share the results. Yeah, as we can see, there's hibernating at home is the most given answer. Thank you for that. And or dispose it with other normal trash. Wow, that leaves us still some tasks to tackle, but it's of course not so surprising. Also, we have a second question for you now. So please also answer that one. What are the most promising e-waste management options in your opinion? Yes, answers are dropping in. Thank you for that. Looking good. I'll give it just a few moments. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and here we can see around about 1/3 of our audience is keen on repairing and reusing, also recycle and refurbish. Yep. Thank you for that. Thank you for participating. Okay, now here comes the presentation that we've all been eagerly awaiting. It will be held by Monica Wambui from CLASP. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Monica is a senior associate at CLASP, and she manages the implementation of the Global LEAP Solar E-Waste Challenge program across the continent and supports the development of resources and strategies geared towards sustainable e-waste management and circular economy. So she is an expert. And dear Monica, please now turn on your camera and microphone and start the presentation or start presenting. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Diane. Just to confirm that I can still see the poll on my side. I don't know if that's the same case for everybody else.
You should see your slide now.
Okay. Odd.
Okay. Okay. Let me quickly check. Sorry about that. Well, I can see your slide now, but
I can also see the slides. Thank you so much.
oh, okay,
Diane.
okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Wambui, as Diane said, and I work with CLASP based in our Nairobi office as a senior associate, looking after our circular economy work. And so, just to kick off the introduction, I'll briefly talk about CLASP. So, next slide, please, Diane. So CLASP improves the energy and environmental performance of appliances and equipment that we use every day, accelerating our transition to a more sustainable world. And we do that by focusing on 2 key elements. Next slide. So we focus on climate, where we are essentially working with government agencies to implement energy efficiency policies for key appliances such as lighting and cooling appliances. And we also we also work on the clean energy access side, where we are basically looking to increase access to clean energy, just working towards SDG 7, and eventually just with gaining the benefits of improved quality of life, and amongst the other benefits in terms of even economic benefits. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide.
I'm sorry, it should be on, but apparently it's slow today. I did change the slide. I'm sorry about that.
All right. No worries.
I'm the slide now that says affordable, low impact, high quality appliances.
And onto slide number 4. Yes. Okay. So how does class? Yes. How does class work in the climate and clean energy access spaces? So we work on energy and quality standards. We do policy compliance, testing, and quality assurance. We also carry out product work on product labels and consumer education. We also run awards and product recognition programs such as the Global Leap program, as well as procurement and operation and the reason I'm here today presenting on extended producer responsibility is because we carried out a study to investigate how insecurity can be applied to end-of-life management of electrical and electronic waste, so e-waste, and also how that can be done through policy. And when you're thinking about policy, then you come back to extended producer responsibility. All right, so that's it about class. So we'll jump right into extended producer responsibility. And just when you're thinking about policy landscape for e-waste, what should we be thinking about? Next slide, please. So when you're thinking about e-waste policies, it comes in 3 parts. So you can think about e-waste policies from the global level, at the regional level, and at the national level. So e-waste, for starters, e-waste policies cannot be debunked from overarching waste policies. As it is, we have seen that e-waste policies originate largely from waste policies. And so when you're thinking of when you begin to be you get more specific and you're looking at it from the e-waste standpoint, then at the global level, you have conventions such as the Basel Convention and the Stockholm Convention. So the Basel Convention just looking at control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste. Stockholm and the Convention just looking to focus on proper management of some components of e-waste and the imports of plastic products, electrical and electronic goods, and just how we ensure that the movement of such materials is controlled. And then at the regional level, you have conventions again, such as the Bamako Convention and the SACEP. The SACEP is the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, which focuses on the South Asian countries. And then the Bamako Convention, for example, prohibits the import to Africa and ocean and inland water dumping or incineration of hazardous waste, and establishes basically precautionary principles to avoid and provides for the sound management of this waste within the continent. And then now we come to the national level, and at this level you have regulations, right, enacted laws. Then you have e-waste guidelines, which when you're thinking about it, e-waste guidelines are the basis or the foundation of the development of regulations. And then you have WE catalogs, and in this case, for example, you have China, where they created a catalog that provides a list of electrical and electronic equipment that must comply with the Chinese WE regulations. And then finally, you have extended producer responsibility, which would fall under national policies. Next slide, please. So what is extended producer responsibility? So EPR schemes are policy approaches that apply the polluter pays principle, which states that producers should bear the responsibility for end-of-life management, compliant with control measures are introduced by public authorities to prevent harm to human health and the environment. And so in EPR schemes, right, the producer's responsibility for reducing environmental impact is extended across the whole life cycle of the product. And so you're looking at it from the upstream activities, including selection of materials and production, manufacturing processes, to the downstream activities such as the use and eventually the end of life management. Next slide. So I particularly like this slide, and I think Elif also just talked a bit about it, because eventually the thing with extended producer responsibility, it favors a transition to the circular economy model, right? And so if you were to look at the graphic where you have product design, where we and as Elif also just mentioned this, how do we, when you're thinking about circular economy, it begins with how the product is designed, right? How are we designing this product to be more repairable, to be easy to reuse, and eventually when you get into this place where you want to recycle, how do you make it more recyclable? And then you get into the production process, and in this case, we would be looking to ensure that we are using less resources and just making that whole process less resource intensive. And then you get to the consumption, where we focus on extending the life of the product, that you keep it in use for as long as possible. And again, as Elif was saying, remove it from the situation where it is put in hibernation, but then that you continue to use it because you have maybe made possible repair and repurposing. And then eventually you get to this place where it's no longer usable, and you create infrastructure that supports collection of waste and then eventually recovery of materials. And this recovery of materials again is linked to how to the design stage, where you design this product to be easy to recycle, easy to take apart, and basically easy to recover the different components as well as the materials. Next slide. So on to EPR schemes. So we've established what EPR schemes and just the basis of their foundation on the polluter pays principle, and just taking back the responsibility of this product to the producer of the product, to the producer. And so what are the key features when you're thinking about an EPR scheme? So for starters, it can be established by government or by private sector entities. I think most times when you hear about it, you may hear it from the government perspective, but it is something that can also be set up by a private sector entity. And so governments may use them to support specific policy goals. For example, in the EU, the EPR schemes are used as a means to achieve the WE directives. And then for the private sector stakeholders, they may find the development of EPR schemes convenient in order to reduce their costs by reusing and recycling the material from the collected products. And then the other element is that it could be voluntary or mandatory. And so typically we will find that these schemes kick out or begin as voluntary and transition to mandatory requirements after a de facto grace period, where producers are given time to set up their systems and comply with the requirements. However, mandatory schemes may be preferred as more effective means of achieving set targets. So I think that grace period is a key element, because you don't want to make it too long and people take it for granted, but also you don't want to make it too short so that you push out the stakeholders, push out the stakeholders. And then at the same time, the other element is that it entails either individual or collective responsibility. This also is interesting. And so mandated extended producer responsibility programs entail an obligation for individual producers to take responsibility for the impacts of their products. However, in practice, producers often exert their responsibility collectively in the form of the producer responsibility organization to implement the extended producer principle on behalf of all members of the company. And so this can take the form as one PRO with multiple members, or multiple PROs with the same EPR system, that covers specific products under a similar umbrella. And so we'll be talking a bit more about the producer responsibility organization and just how that is fitting in a specific case study based on India. And then the next feature is that you need to have targets. So targets that define collection, sorting, recycling, and recovery, so that you're able to assess monitor the performance, and just also get a basis for improvement. Next slide. So what are the operating and financing models for extended producer responsibility schemes? So there are three main ones. And so the first one has us focusing on the producers, where the producer bears the full responsibility, full financial responsibility, but then operations would be shared across stakeholders. And so an example of this is in India, where the producers work with producer responsibility organizations and pay for recycling of e-waste as per mandated targets. And then the other model is where the responsibility is shared between the government and producers. And so producers may pay fees to the municipalities who remain in charge of waste management. And an example of this is in Denmark. And then the third operating model is one where the consumer bears the whole or part financial responsibility, but the operational responsibilities are shared across stakeholders. And so in this, I'll give two examples. So like you have in Switzerland, where an advanced recycling fee is paid by consumers. The advanced recycling fee that is paid by consumers supports the operations, so subsidizing recovery, transportation, and processing. And then in Japan, they have a consumer paid EPR system where consumers pay an additional fee to cover for the e-waste transportation, refurbishment, and recycling, but producers implement the refurbishment and recycling. So eventually, you just have this, despite maybe we could say that the financial burden falls on one specific stakeholder, eventually you see that this organic collaboration needs to happen across the different stakeholders, so the policy or the local governments, as well as the customer or the user of the product, as well as the producer of the product. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges of extended producer responsibility? And these two will sound familiar based on some of the challenges that Elif also mentioned. And so when you're thinking about extended producer responsibility and linking it back up to the first slide where we talked about when you're thinking about the policy landscape, what needs to be in place, you need to have a national circular economic policy framework or even an e-waste management legislation so that the EPR scheme can just be built off that. But then as mentioned, there is a lack that most countries do not have these necessary frameworks in place yet. And then the other challenge also when you're thinking about extended producer responsibility is a lack of awareness by local stakeholders. And when we think local stakeholders, we're looking at the table to your right is just a summary of who stakeholders could be. So as mentioned, it's the producers, it's the people who sell these products, the retailers, the suppliers, the distributors, then the users of the products, and then you have the end-of-life stakeholders, the people who are involved in the repair, in the collection, in the refurbishing, the recycling. And so for starters, you'll find that most of these stakeholders are not aware of this opportunity of extended producer responsibility. But then in addition to that, then there is also a lack of collaboration and connectedness between these stakeholders that you will find. Maybe you have like specific suppliers who have set up their own EPR scheme, but then that they're the only ones in that ecosystem and they're the ones who are doing that. So that people are implementing efforts, but they're implementing them in silos. The other key challenge is the lack of infrastructure, which again was mentioned by Elif, that when you're thinking about extended producer responsibility, so you want to increase capacity in every sense of the word, that you have, that you can support the reverse logistics of getting these products back, but you also have capacity that supports recycling. But even before you get to recycling, that you have sufficient capacity to carry out the repair and refurbishment. And then finally, is again the lack of technical capacity to support elements such as refurbishment, repair, as well as recycling. Next slide. So onto this case study on India and just how the extended producer responsibility is working there through this producer responsibility organization. So Karo Sambhav is the first producer responsibility organization registered in India for e-waste, and it was established in 2016. So their mission is to drive long-term behavioral change around recycling, where participation is coordinated across sectors, fair value is provided to all stakeholders, and action is led primarily by producers. And so they act as a coordinator between all actors in the e-waste chain, connecting waste pickers, aggregators, last mile collectors, recyclers, repair shops, waste management organizations, and the government. So they provide a number of services to corporations as well as governments, universities, and individuals, including waste collection and recycling, as well as compliance, documentation, development, and management, and as well as awareness schemes. And so in India, 95% of the collected e-waste is processed by the informal sector. And so Carol Sambhav is uniquely improving the e-waste environment by intentionally collaborating with the informal sector to harmonize waste streams, provide improved employment, amenities, and revenue for the Indian government. And so Carol Sambhav also organizes informal waste aggregators into groups to channel the movement of e-waste while also providing ease by purchasing non-dismantled e-waste. And so in addition, they formalize workers by providing aid and opening bank accounts, paying taxes, and ensuring on-time equitable payments. So wholesomely, by formalizing these operations, Carol Sambhav greatly improves the transparency of the waste management sector, specifically in the waste supply chain and waste management practices. Yeah. So, and then currently they're operating nearly in 70 cities of India and engaging with over 600,000 people as of 2018. And they also have a school program where they educate students on environmental waste awareness and behavioral change, promoting both sustainable consumption and circular economy, particularly regarding e-waste. Yeah. So I think the reason we brought up this case study was just thinking about how you bring in all these different stakeholders and also with the linkage to the informal sector, because when you're thinking about e-waste, you cannot remove the presence or the importance of the informal sector in the conversation around e-waste, and how just this existence of this PRO brings together all these different stakeholders and is able to create this ecosystem that not only supports sustainable e-waste management, but then progresses India towards this place where they get to advance closer to circular economy. Next slide. So what are the EPR policy instruments? So there are three key instruments: administrative instruments, so just looking at fulfillment of environmentally sound treatment standards, fulfillment of minimum recycled material content, and then you also have economic instruments. So this is just, again, looking at taxes, subsidies, advanced disposal fee systems, depository fund systems. So economic instruments that support the implementation of extended producer responsibility programs. And then finally, you have information-based systems, which basically work to make information available, and this is information available to different stakeholders. It could be in reporting to the government, it could be in making consumers aware maybe of the recyclable content in your product, so maybe through marking or labeling, or even just consulting with, again, going back to the government, and then consultations with the government. But basically it looks at information provision to the different stakeholders. Next slide. So what are the key success factors for any extended producer responsibility program? So the four key things. For starters is the capacity building. For starters, you need to identify the stakeholders. You cannot, a successful extended producer responsibility program needs to be all inclusive. So you need to identify the key stakeholders, and you can refer to the table that we had seen initially, straight from the producer and ending at the recycling stage. Who are the stakeholders in between? And then you have the identification of skill gaps. So you bring all of them together, identify what the skill gaps are, then create or implement measures to bridge these skill gaps, and then also resources. So post, you may develop accessible asset group of stakeholders, but then in developing accessible resources, it means that there is continuity, and then this information continues to be open source and available to even larger groups of people. And then education and awareness raising is a key element when you're thinking about extended producer responsibility. You need to build an understanding of extended producer responsibility schemes for everyone, again, across the stakeholder, that value chain of stakeholders, and just what their role is and how then they play into the extended producer responsibility. Then you also need to securing buy-in is by each stakeholder understanding what role then they have to play in achieving or in implementing the extended producer responsibility. And then you foster relationships, again bringing us back to creating this network where everyone is talking and people are collaborating where possible. And then finally, compliance. And so when you're thinking about compliance, it's just how do you carry out this monitoring and verification and enforcement of this law that you would have implemented? So maybe like in the case where the law has become, or this extended producer responsibility is mandatory, right? You need to create clear and reliable legal frameworks, and then develop a compliance mechanism that includes market surveillance and enforcement. And this, just sorry to take you back to the legal framework, the part of what this legal framework will identify is the requirements that the different stakeholders need to meet, because then the efforts for surveillance and enforcement would be based on these regulations, and then carrying out coordination on national, regional, and international levels. How does that look like? Is that a possibility? And then finally, the next factor is evaluation. So you've carried out your compliance, and then evaluation, where you look at the going back to the targets that you had set out, if in terms of refurbishment, repairing, recycling targets. So just do a review, a typical evaluation where you look at the planning, the checking, and then the acting based on the progress that has been made. Next slide.
Monica, you've got 1 minute left.
Thanks, Diane. And this is my last slide. So this slide is just taking us back again to why extended producer responsibility is important and how it links us back to circular economy, right? And so nearly half of all global emissions come from how we make and use things. And so to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, we need to build a circular economy and rethink how we make and use things. And so what you can see on your screen right now is just graphics showing the gains that we can achieve through implementing circular economy. And how we actually get to implement circular economy is actually through the development and implementation of extended producer responsibility schemes. Yeah, that's it on my side. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you so much, Monica. Wow, I'm sure this gave us a lot of food for thought. Excellent presentation. Yes, to our audience, if you do have questions addressed to Monica, please do post them in the questions box and we will address them in our question and answer round. It was a pleasure having you, Monica. And this now leads us to the next agenda point. We will open up our panel discussion. We've got a great panel today. Lots of top experts from the field and practitioners, which I will introduce very shortly before we start. So first of all, here with us today is Amadou Cissé. He's an environmental management consultant at the World Food Programme Regional Bureau in Dakar in Senegal. From there, he's supporting 90 country offices to identify and comply with national environmental regulations and other stakeholder obligations. He's got more than 20 years of experience in sustainable development projects, addressing natural resources and the environment. Great to have you with us, Amadou. Also, we have Paul McCallion from UNHCR in Bangladesh. He's a senior energy and environment officer. He's got more than 30 years experience working across private development and humanitarian sectors. He's got a vast experience working across 5 continents in 33 countries. Yeah, like I said, currently working with UNHCR in Bangladesh, and amongst other topics, he's there supporting the access to energy for refugees. Third person with us today on the panel is Arinda Franklin Okeyamba. Franklin is a compliance and external relations manager at FRES Uganda. That is one of the leading energy service providers in Uganda, and there in this company he's in charge of ensuring that they operate in compliance with existing environmental regulations. And yeah, and he's trying to make sure that his company's activities do not create an unsafe environment for the communities they operate in. First person with us today on the panel is Mr. Abubakar Mayemba. Very interesting also, Abu oversees the implementation of the e-waste pilot project in Bidi, Uganda. And I'm sure most of you know, Bidi is the world's second largest refugee settlement. And there he's IOM's focal point for e-waste activities on the ground. He's offering technical assistance and he's coordinating with local and national government and partners also with the vision to green Bidi and its host community. And last but not least with us today is Alexander Bateiger. He's an advisor to the GIZ Global Project on Circular Economy. And there he's coordinating the e-waste working group of the Prevent Waste Alliance. He's part of the supervisory committee of the Solving the E-Waste Problem initiative. And until 2 years ago, he was seconded to Ghana. There he was advising the government on sustainable e-waste management. So, wow, great panel today. Lots of top-notch experts, as I said. It's a pleasure to have you all. And we would kickstart the discussion now. So please, all of you, turn on your microphone and camera and join us for the discussion. And also my colleague Lucas, also please turn on your microphone and camera. Thank you. Great to see you all. Wow.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. I will hand over to you, Lucas, now for the discussion.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much that all of you are here. And Diana, thank you for the introduction. First of all, I invite all of you to be active in this panel discussion, to as well ask questions to the other speakers. So feel free to always bring up what's on your heart. Yeah, for the start, I would like to ask to all of you, besides the quick introduction, what have you been involved, or how have you been involved into the e-waste topic in your work? And well, of course we received already some information, but if there's something additional. And as well, I would like to ask you, how does e-waste management look like in your country of operation or from your experiences? So yeah, just to start the panel discussion to get a little bit more insight. And I just would start on the left of my screen, and I will hand over the word to Alexander, and then I will just call your names, and then please.
Okay, I'm Alexander Bateiger, working for GIZ in headquarters right now. So the question how e-waste is managed in Germany might not necessarily be so interesting, but I will give an interesting fact about, let's say, how EPR works. Looking at mobile phones, GSMA just recently published a circular economy paper on mobile phones. And even though we have in Europe a fully implemented EPR, the collection rate in Europe is between 12 and 15% for mobile phones. And we put 2 billion mobile phones a year on the market. And even in markets like Europe, the collection is very low. And we see similar situations in the United States, Japan, China, and as we have heard as well in India. Going back into, let's say, the field I mostly work in, we see a lot of good things in e-waste management, and I do not like to paint a picture of only problems. There is an incredible culture and service delivery of collection, mainly delivered by informal actors. So this is certainly something, if you want to formalize or develop a system, of course, you have to integrate them to get volumes, and they're doing an incredibly good job. I've experienced that on several occasions in Ghana. They just collect it at your doorstep. I would love to have it in Germany. So maybe we can look into those countries to learn how to do things better in Europe. Secondly, there is a fantastic repair culture normally. Both activities are mostly driven by economic factors. So whenever somebody can make money out of what we perceive as e-waste, most likely somebody will start to doing it. So this is really something you want to support whenever you intervene into the system. Having said that, collection and recycling in itself are not good. So we heard a lot about EPR, that there is the polluter pays framework. Unfortunately, in the informal sector, there is, or that's in the countries I've been working on, there is no level playing field for sustainability. So you're competing with formal and informal actors that potentially can externalize environmental social impacts and maybe do not pay taxes. So if you actually want to do everything right over there, you have a very steep uphill battle. And this is something you see, for example, a lot in the PROs that have been established in India, in Kenya, or in Nigeria, where we have been as well involved at. So my opening remark would be, and I will indicate I've never worked on refugee settlements, so this is certainly not an area of expertise of mine. But what we see, let's say, in general in those countries is that everything is driven by economics. So if you can make money out of the waste, or what we consider as waste, mostly they consider it as scrap or as products beyond repair, it will be done. And I would say the most promising way forward is to see, okay, how to maintain what is good in the system and combine it with compliance and standards. And for that one, you need regulation and finance. So thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Amadou.
Yes, thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Alexander. I mean, you took the lightning out of my thunder here. I mean, I don't know what more to add. He touched a lot of good points, and I truly believe he's absolutely right. If you look in my region in particular, you can name maybe 3 or 4 countries where you do have a strong, mature ecosystem. I'll just name a few, like Nigeria, for instance. Maybe Ghana. I haven't been there to verify, right? And definitely Senegal, because I've been there, and I also seen some cases in Nigeria where you do have entities, programs that started maybe 6, 7 years ago, or even 10 years ago with the local phone company Orange, right? Going through a scheme of trying to collect old phones and send them back to Europe. So typically, as we mentioned, the biggest challenge is always collection. So you're looking at, here the practice is your phone is broken, you take it to the next guy or the next girl to fix it. And that's how that phone gets recycled. But when we talk about e-waste itself, like I would say the biggest problem that we have with e-waste here is generally the batteries, right? They don't really know what to do with batteries unless you have a company that does both scrapping of metal and plastic. And typically, just to add the legal framework behind it, you will find that all of our governments have signed the Basel Convention, where plastic was added. So that was a big deal for a lot of them. I met with some folks in the ministry in Nigeria. They were very happy of that step because, again, they didn't know what to do with it. We talk about hibernation in terms of e-waste. It's also true for any other waste where there is no capacity locally to handle that. But again, I think that we are seeing a development in the region where we are pushing for more regional approach, and we're encouraging actors in different countries to work together because we do have a regional program, and we inviting them as experts to provide either solutions or best practices to other people in the ecosystem. Again, I think there is a lot of opportunities. There's definitely interest from a lot of donors in that arena. But again, it's really about Sorry, that's not me. Okay, anyways, I'll wrap up. That's my key there, but I think we're looking good and there's definitely progress. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul?
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Yeah, no,
Thanks. Excuse me, sorry. I don't know from where the noise comes from, but maybe we better turn off our microphone when we're not speaking, and then we're not interfering. Thank you.
for this operation, the entry from e-waste is from discussions with the ministry relevant for the refugees. We were moving in the direction of repair and vocational training and stuff like that for both communities, and the Ministry for Energy had just set up an e-waste unit, so we were requested to run a pilot in some of the camps. So we've been for the last 3 years running pre-pilots, and pre-pilots are like where there is no baseline and there's very little institutional knowledge or documentation of the topic. So we've done pre-pilots for DRR lightning protection. We've done pre-pilots for pressure cooker fuel conservation and stuff like that. So we're currently running 2 pre-pilots of e-waste collection. What we've noticed is that with any camp or urban setting, there can be generally a big problem with solid waste management. So we're just regarding our e-waste efforts as to be combined to be one stream of the solid waste. So we're sort of like pulling in the energy environment unit to work with, the wash unit and the wash sector and so forth. So then what we're looking at is there are different camps of different ages. The camps that are longer established have a higher capacity for electrical appliances that they keep, even the broken ones. For example, I had a colleague about 2 years ago, and a very expensive, high quality coffee machine that they bought was damaged during a lightning surge. We took the coffee machine to just outside the camps in the host area, and they took the coffee machine off us and said to come back in 6 weeks. 6 weeks became 8, but they needed a component that they got 4 hours drive away from another city. So there seems to be this informal, self-taught electronic knowledge. So this coffee machine was sent to this city where the guy said, yeah, I've got these 3 parts. Then it was sent back. Then the guy put them in. Then when it worked, payment went back to that guy in the city. So what we've learned about the e-waste surveys that we've done is 78% of refugees are not aware what e-waste was or it held any value, but they hold on to their products because the local repair shops, when they find something that they can't repair, go door to door and ask to look at their appliances. Then, as per appliance, if it has the component they want, they then pay them for it. So we're learning a lot about what's the value of e-waste, how extensively it went on in a sort of like a culturally different setting. It was e-waste, but it wasn't disposed of the way we perceive e-waste. So that's where we're coming from on it, and we're running with the pre-pilots with our energy partner, and Schneider Electric are on board, the GPA are on board, Electricians Sans Frontier, our local partner, NGO Forum, and of course the government. And that's the e-waste drive from Bangladesh. From a refugee camp in Bangladesh, not from Bangladesh.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, very interesting. We've experienced the same situation with the if we talk about repair, for example, in Rhino Camp in northwest Uganda or North Uganda, that yeah, they make the best out of it, and they know where they get the spare parts if they get it, which is of course sometimes very tricky if we talk about displacement settings, especially when they are very remote. But yeah, if we talk about solar lanterns or if we talk about cell phones, they keeping them alive kind of in order to provide and search for spare parts in order to increase the life of this product. Thank you. Abu, I would hand over to you, and I think you can contribute some very interesting thoughts on this as well, since you're in Bidi.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and nice meeting every one of you. I'm Abu Bekr. I'm based in Yumbe. Yumbe, that's where you find Bidi refugee settlement, the second largest settlement in the world. And when it comes to e-waste, it's quite a big challenge here because Bidi is off grid. So the only access to power that we have is via solar products. So you find a number of products here, different makes in Bidi. We did conduct a survey in 2020 where the biggest concern was access to repair services. They buy these items from the market locally very cheaply, but then access to repair is a big challenge to them because there are no repair centers. The business people here only come in for a season. Someone brings in the lanterns and then he's gone to another town. He might come back after 6 months. So access to repair was a challenge. And what we found, the way they were disposing of all these products was some were keeping them in the house. Actually, majority were keeping them in the house. And then a number of them were burying them and then disposing them off into the environment. So for this project, what we came up with was an idea to ease access to repair services for the refugees in Bidi. It's a pilot project for this, where we are targeting the lanterns that were distributed during the emergency happening in 2016 by UNHCR, about 200,000 lanterns, and these were sunbelt lanterns. And we found that because they have an attachment to these products, most of these were in the houses. So what we did was train technicians, the refugees from within the refugee settlement. We did train these technicians to handle repair. And then we brought in a component of circularity for these components. Let's say if our lantern is broken, you pick components that you can use and then repair another lantern. And then for the batteries, what we did is replace new batteries into these lanterns to give them like a new lease to life. And then pick the old batteries and repurpose them into battery packs. Now, these battery packs can be used, to light the homes, for schools, for hospitals, because lighting is a very, very major component here. There's no access to grid electricity. The challenge that we have in Bidi, as I said before, is access to repair services. And then the standard of the goods here. You find that we have so many products that can last, let's say, a maximum of 6 months, and then the battery is dead. That means one has to put it aside, get a new one. So we have so much e-waste that we're trying to pilot and see how best do we handle this. From the national perspective of e-waste, like Alexander said earlier, e-waste management in Uganda is mostly informal. And then when it's done, they don't do it in a sustainable way. It's about profits. What can I pick from here that I can put back to the market and then earn some little money? So you find if someone is collecting a TV screen, they'll pick up the copper wires and then they dump the rest unsustainably. The plastics are not managed so well. So it's quite a challenge for the e-waste in Uganda. Lucas, that's the brief highlights about e-waste management in Bidi and Uganda. Thank you. Over to you, Lucas.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Franklin, I will give you the word, and then I would give everyone of you the chance because I saw many writing some notes. Maybe you would like to, I don't know, interact somehow. Franklin. You're still on mute.
Franklin from First Uganda, and the first stands for Foundation Rural Energy Services.
Franklin, sorry for interrupting you. The volume is very, very low. I think it's maybe, I don't know, to have the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth or.
Okay, am I clear now?
No, not better.
What's wrong? Hello?
Yeah, I hear you, but with very, very.
I don't know what seems to be the case, because my check earlier was okay.
Maybe it's working without the microphone. Otherwise, I would go on, unfortunately.
Other mic and try again.
Perfect. Now it's a lot better. Perfect.
Okay.
Great.
So as I was saying, is the Franklin from Fresh Uganda, and Fresh is the Foundation Rural Energy Services, and we energy service provider in Western Uganda. We operate in 3 refugee camps. That is the Chakatu, Rwamwanja, and the Nachivale refugee camps. We have over 1,000 clients in those camps. And obviously to us, e-waste refers to mostly to batteries. We put out over 100 tons of batteries and solar panels every year in the communities we operate. And that's about 2% of the national footprint, which is a bit high. So we're obviously conscious about how we impact those communities. So to deal with that, we came up with a model before we started that enables us to own the products at the end of their life. So when our batteries get used up, we have the legal right to repossess them from the clients and recycle them responsibly. And in that, we managed to come up with, look for a safe recycling partner, and that's EnviroServe from Rwanda that handles our recycling, because locally we could not find a source we could trust. We have some platforms that dispose equipment, they burn up the batteries or the other panels and all, but we thought that was not good enough. And we decided to look for a company that is the ISO certified, and that was EnviroServe. They are headquartered in UAE, but they have centers in Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania. So they pick our equipment every once a year. We load them up in containers, and they pay for items that they feel have positive recycling value, especially the batteries. And then we pay for the items that have negative recycling value, mostly like the panels and cables and all. So it's kind of, we net off each other. Whoever has the higher bill to pay pays the other, and then they are taken, and then they give us a certificate every year that our items that we gave to them have been safely recycled. And we believe that gives us a bit of an edge of our competition, because most of the people that don't have that kind of agreement with their clients cannot go and pick batteries once the batteries are old, because the customers own them and the customers hold on to them, hoping that they can get some money out of it some way, then they end up polluting the environment. We have cases where all the batteries have end up burning some houses, and it's quite difficult. The regulations we have are there, but they are not enforced. So the government really is much focused on increasing access to energy, and they're not yet looking at what happens to those batteries that are brought in. Also, because of our model, we are forced to bring equipment that is durable. Our batteries are sourced from Germany. Hopec gives us batteries with 7,000 cycle life ideally. So we're expecting something like 10 to 15 years out of the batteries before we can even think of recycling them. And whereas most batteries on market from China and all, they can at best last 2 to 3 years. So we don't move a lot of batteries. Like last year, we had 30 tons of e-waste to recycle, and this year we were looking at about 25 tons. So it helps us a bit because of the equipment being of good quality. And yeah, we believe that the private sector should play a more role in finding solutions, how we can control the environment. Because if you take the refugee settlement example, that there are so many solar companies are pumping in batteries, and these are small communities. And obviously, if nothing is done in the long run, then it's a disaster waiting to happen. And we believe that innovation could be maybe the way, that if we could encourage startups that can have ideas of how to put value to the waste, then the people would let go of those old batteries or computers or TVs in return for some money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I would have a question, but I would give you the chance if someone would like to say something or ask something to the others. Just go for it. Otherwise, I would like to ask you something.
Real quick, I'm going to add a little bit. So thank you so much again, Franklin and Robert and Abubakar and Paul, for your contribution. Yeah, it's true. Again, from our perspective, one thing that we do is we do have a waste recycler checklist. And so as we are accepting people in our program with the work that we do, we have to verify that they actually exist. One of the biggest challenges, again, is the fact that a lot of these activities are taking place in the informal sector. If you don't ask the right keyword or the right questions to people, you may not be led in the right direction. So for instance, if you say electronic waste, nobody knows what you're talking about. But the minute you say computer repair, cell phone repair, then people start pointing, go in this neighborhood, go in this street, and you might find something like that. When you're looking for a formal business, we did find one in Niger, for instance, that we're working with. You will find that sometimes the authorities themselves have not granted them the license, even though they've been operating for quite some time, and their practices are legit. So you find yourself in a position where do you follow the rules according to the law, which might take 2 or 3 years, when you know that the system and the process is working. So again, it's really at your discretion. We encourage to always collaborate with the government. As a matter of fact, that one contact that we had was the one that gave us the contact with the government, so we can meet folks in the ministry so they knew of each other. It was just a matter of a procedural delay in terms of the paperwork, but we thought that they went great. We started discussing about this problem for the last few years. We have over 457 radios and other electronic equipment that was stored in 2 containers, and we have to get rid of it because we're moving from one property to the other. So time being of the essence, we have to jump in. But overall, again, I think that once you take the time to visit them, you talk to them, you understand their process, and you work with them, you can get a lot of good information. And again, we are trying to set that standard across. So when we're working with my point of contacts in the various countries, I'll run them through the checklist. And then when I do my field visits, we go together to check out these businesses and have a better understanding of what it is and a better appreciation of what to do with it. but it is also an internal collaboration because we are forcing our folks to think about grid procurement and what it means. Because again, we buy all these things. Sometimes it's equipment that's donated, but what's the end cycle, right? What are you going to do in the end when we end up having all this waste, as the colleagues mentioned, out there in refugee camps where you don't have a choice? This is what's given to you, and it's piling up. And you're being told by our executives in other places that just store it, but at some point you run out of storage space. So again, even if the formal sector is not there, but there are possibilities again to find somebody to fix it, as Paul mentioned, and it might take weeks or months to get there. Let's jump on that because I think it's really about finding and providing a solution to a local problem with a local perspective. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's very, very important as well. For example, what Paul was mentioning, to not only think, if we talk about e-waste, this is a tricky situation. If we talk about a displacement setting, for example, where no waste management system normally exists, but for example, include e-waste, for example, in solid waste management, if there's such a system. But yeah, as I said, displacement settings are a little bit more, maybe not difficult, but the certain services are not there existing, like, for example, in rural areas or especially in urban areas. So the situation is highly depending on what actually can be done. Is there someone who would like to add something or say? Otherwise, I would. Okay, Alexander, go for it.
Maybe a quick general remark. So when we framed the topic, we had a very beautiful presentation about extended producer responsibility, and now we see that actually the people working on the ground do start piloting solutions. So I would strongly encourage whoever is working in the sector, do not wait for EPR, and try to do what you can do and can control immediately. And to some extent, maybe you can control more parameters than in other sectors. If you have, for example, procurement guidelines about the high quality and durable equipment, you can ask for repairability. And as well, you can try to use less hazardous substances. So the problem with e-waste management is the environmental and social externality. But if there is less toxic content, it's not as big as a problem. Then as well, you can think along the line of warranties and services or servicing structures, and as well, you could as well coordinate with other sectors. So most certainly, the humanitarian sector will not solve the e-waste problem in any country. So it will be one piece in the puzzle that can contribute, but try to find others who want to achieve that. This could be the telcos. You can as well talk to other United Nations agencies on the ground, what they do with the e-waste they generate in their offices. And maybe by just doing or by piloting some small solutions within the networks you have already, you significantly contribute to improving the overall sector.
Yeah, very, very valid point. And I have to admit that you kind of already took a little bit of my final question since we're already ending. We are getting closer to the end, unfortunately. Yeah, this is very, very important, especially if we talk about such a small, in comparison to the whole world, small context. If we talk about the humanitarian context or displacement context, that we need to join forces. We need to work together on the topic. There is, of course, already exchange, but this cannot be it cannot be enough. There's always more need to be in exchange more and work together on this. And thank you very much, Alexander. This is definitely a very good point. And I would like to ask you, before we jump to the Q&A, where I just going to ask a question to Monica, because we're already very close to the end. What do you think is the biggest need or opportunity of the e-waste sector in your country of operation or in your sphere of work where you're working on. Alexander, you already mentioned it. If you would like to add something, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I would like to ask as well the question to the others. What do you think is more needed, addition to that what Alexander mentioned, or what do you think are already successes, for example? Alexander, if you don't want to add something, I would hand over directly to Amadou. Or you can take the chance as well later on, of course.
Nothing to add for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll say the biggest opportunity is really capacity building. I think that, as we're looking at this transition of how to better manage electronic waste, if we were able and capable here to transform that waste into another resource, so i.e., you are now having a manufacturer of batteries here. So you're taking these batteries and transforming that. You are also taking, we have all the same Samsungs, Nokias, whatever it is, Android phones. Is there an opportunity now to recycle these phones locally? And when we're looking at computers as well, the motherboards and the different chips, they contain precious metals. A lot of the time, that is bought here and resold in Europe by other larger groups. Is there a way to now have a manufacturing plant of that level here, one per region or one per whatever 5-6 countries, where now that waste can be recycled at a local level? I think it'll be beneficial for both end of the equation, because shipping back, we've seen it with tires, we've seen it with sometimes computers, is not as cost effective. So I think that because it's here that the waste adds up, this is here that it should be taken care of, treated, transformed. Let's talk about circular economy from that standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Franklin.
Yeah, I think that maybe to add to what could be done is I look at it from the business perspective, that if we're not relying on the government to so come up with solutions, there's obviously the business sector. And here I'm looking at having a way of sharing statistics. People need to know how much e-waste is available, because there are so many solutions around the world where they are not recycling e-waste for profit. I gave an example of Enviroserve that pays us every year to collect our dead batteries, but I know they don't have enough volumes. So they were tasking us that, if we could have collecting even from other companies, then we'll be able to, aggregate it together, and then they will come and pick it. So if there was already statistics on BDBD, the biggest camp in the country, about how much e-waste is available, then companies like Enviroserve would be interested in coming and picking that up and paying for it even. So I believe that statistics could go a good way if we had a way of sharing it online, and that in Uganda each year we have this kind of materials coming in, this kind of materials coming to end of life, then companies could start businesses around it. That's the easiest way that really the private sector can contribute to e-waste management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Abu. You're still muted.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and everyone. From my end, the biggest need in this e-waste conversation is awareness. If communities and everyone is informed of the impacts e-waste poses to the environment and their health, they would move faster to have these items either sustainably handled or repaired based on the circular economy. In that, if you have an old phone, why sell it off or dispose it off when they can just repair it, put in a new battery, and then you can use it again? And then the other one, the other need is streamlining our policies. If we streamline the policies, it would make it easier for the private sector to join the conversation. But in the current situation that we're in, we have policies that say we need to move in the right direction on e-waste, and then we have policies that kind of hinder investment in electronic waste management. You might want, for instance, to bring in a shredder for the items, and then the taxes are quite high. putting higher costs of operation. But if the costs are lower on these items, then we could have more investment and then respond to e-waste, then curb the challenge, climate change, actually it causes to climate change. That's my submission. Lucas, over to you.
Thank you very much. And Paul.
Thank you. I would actually, I would think that it's at the point of distribution. So basically, I would, if when a tender is being considered or piggybacking, whatever, if there would be more points, more emphasis put on, so say, for example, a solar home system or a solar streetlight goes to country X, that when the tender is being done, there has to be a list of the company have to put down the list of the e-waste recycling centres within each continent, or how the e-waste can go back, show proof of ethical disposal, end of life, so that you're not bringing products in where you've got 6 or 7 different types of batteries, and you're scratching your head with what to do with a lot of these products. Also, the same whether it's partners or philanthropic goodwill people coming in for solar streetlights or whatever, there has to be some type of a thought that what do we do after we do our little bit and we put this technology in the area. So I would push more that as the product comes in, there has to be a clear end of life route for each product, or for the battery, or for the circuit boards, the LEDs, and so forth. So I would put more emphasis on the showing of the end of life supply chain, and the practical side and how it would be done. Companies should be marked up on that, encourage more to do that, other than being able to show warranty, and other than being able to show less packaging, and other than to be more responsive to the price. So I would say that it has to happen at the start, and then from there we can go forward and address the issue in a less chaotic way. Over.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much to all of you who were participating in the panel discussion. I'm sorry. And I would like to ask one question from the audience to Monica before I hand over to Diana and to close the webinar. So thank you very, very much for your valuable contribution, Monica. So the question is there any EPR or PRO or PRO experience from African context, especially from Kenya? How does it work and challenges?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Lucas. And so there is PRO. So extensively, there is discussions around EPR from various countries, as we've heard, even from like Nigeria. In Kenya, based on the question from the audience, Kenya is in the how can I phrase this? So Kenya is in the process, has had e-waste legislation in draft, and right now is currently implementing or integrating extended producer responsibility elements into this legislation. And extensively, what has happened, so there's a PRO umbrella that is focusing together different manufacturers in the country, but also there is a PRO that is bringing together off-grid solar sector players to just think about how they can optimize their existing resources to support sustainable e-waste management for their sector. But then this is being done in collaboration with other, the goal would be that this would be implemented in collaboration with other sectors, and with the goal of complying with the extended producer responsibility regulation, which will be taken up in the country. So there is, the short answer to this is that there is examples from the continent of implementation of extended producer responsibility, development of producer responsibility organizations, but I think overwhelmingly also is that there is more that can be done. You get to this place where fine, you maybe it's a multifaceted problem. So either the regulation remains in draft for a very long time, it gets to a place where it is adopted, but then it is not implemented, and then comes in the challenges of implementation. But shortest answer, there is examples from the region on implementation of EPR and PRO. Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, I will hand over to Diana for the closing and for one final poll. And again, thank you very much to all of you. Diana.
Thank you so much, Lucas and Monica, and also to all our other wonderful panelists today. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks for your insightful contributions and the great discussion. Yeah, we actually almost finished, but before you all leave, dear audience, please participate in one final poll question. I hope you can see it now. The poll question is, from your point of view, who is responsible for e-waste management? After all that you heard from our experts, yeah, from your point of view, who's responsible for e-waste management? Either producers, distributors, consumers, government, or others? Thank you. I can see the answers are coming in, giving it 5 more seconds. And I'm going to close the poll. So yeah, there's an overwhelming majority that say producers are responsible. That's quite interesting. Thank you for that. Thanks to our audience, to all who has attended our webinar today. Like I said before, this webinar was being recorded and it will be available via this link that you can see here. It's also posted in the chat. And also, please check out the site, as we shared a lot of documentation there. You can find all the links on the webinar's Energypedia site. So now all that's left for me to say is thank you for your attention. Thanks again to our wonderful panelists, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dan. Bye.